Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pierre the Chef. I'm Steve, joined as always by the indescribable. Let's go with that. Christopher, how
That's
are
a
you, my
nice
friend?
neutral word that can be taken positively or negatively. I am currently the well-centered Christopher.
Yes, and I am not. I am the off-center Steve, which maybe that describes us just in general. My more well-centered companion and I a little off-center. Not that you're totally on-center in other ways either,
No,
but
no, 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 no.
so how are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, we talked a little bit before the show, but yeah, I'm doing okay. Nothing worth going into on the show here. Just business as normal, more or less.
Yeah.
You don't want to get into too much personal stuff when you're on the stream.
No, when people don't care about our personal lives anyway.
No, they don't. Unless the only reason that most people would care is so they have something to mock for, and so
Exactly.
we don't want to open that door.
No, these people don't care. Even the ones who pretend to be your friend. I know that you guys don't really care about us. I've grown cynical in the last couple of seconds.
The last couple of seconds, you said.
Just the last couple of seconds. You may have noticed, both you and also our gentle viewers who I just insulted.
Because that's the clever way to go. Yes.
I know what I'll do. I'll insult the audience. That's never been done before.
We appreciate you, morons. That goes over well, Steve.
Thanks for watching, you jerks.
Yeah, we appreciate your low standards.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for choosing to waste an hour and a half of your time. So yeah, as you all may have noticed by now, since it's just been the two of us talking up to this point, no Pierre. No Pierre. And I have not heard from Pierre. I do not know what his excuse is this time, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Oh, really?
I'm going to call Pierre.
We can see the reflection of the room. We know it's not just a white screen because we can see Oh, wow.
Look at that. Look, there's one of the lights. Look at that. I'm taking you behind the curtain here.
Yeah, behind the curtain that you see whenever you do a Trek Actually video.
Exactly.
The camera's pointing the other way.
Exactly. Let me see if I can get my wrestling poster.
Probably not enough light in that direction.
Yeah. No, I don't think I can. Oh, there it is. There's my wrestling poster. Anyway,
thank you for spending your time watching us play with reflections.
Hey, if you hadn't pointed it out, I wouldn't have fucked around with it for so long. Anyway,
my fault,
it's all your fault. I don't take blame. I place blame. I'm an atheist. We'll get to that in a second. No, so I'm gonna call Pierre. I'm gonna call Pierre.
Oh, really?
And yes, really. This is real. There's Pierre's contact, and I'm calling him right now. Okay, it's going to his voicemail. Okay, and he's got one of those voicemails where you have to talk to it. It'll be like, would you like to leave a message? So, yes. We. Okay.
I had not considered that.
Hey, Pierre. I don't speak French, but hey, it's Steve. We're doing the show. Me and Christopher, the show we named after you. And you're not here, and I haven't heard from you, so just let me know, okay? Just give me a call. That's it. You should be here. Okay, bye. I love you. Okay, we'll see if he calls me back. I haven't heard from him, so we'll just see if he calls me back. But, yeah, so as I alluded to quite clumsily and dishonestly a moment ago, because that's actually not the area of atheism we're going to be talking about for the most part, we decided we would actually talk a little bit about atheism in this episode. Not so much the atheist movement, which is a trash fire, but atheism just in general as a concept, because that's something that we both have in common, right?
Yeah. Picture the graphic for Who's Garbage Now, only everything is on fire. And that's sort of where the atheist movement is right now.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to get into that too much. We wanted to just talk more about atheism in general before it became co-opted by what's the word I'm looking for? Garbage.
Garbage people, yeah.
I had to think hard on that one.
Bad
garbage, which is the word you're not allowed to use on Facebook because the bots will flag the comment and delete it on you.
Yeah. That seems fair.
Yeah. If you use the phrase "men are garbage," the bots will eliminate your comment, even if it's made on a private post on somebody else's wall.
Right.
I can tell you this from experience.
But if you are literally a Nazi...
Yeah, that's fine.
Not just someone who says Nazi-ish things and people call you a Nazi, but you are literally a neo-Nazi and you run a neo-Nazi group. You have decent odds of staying on. You might get removed. You might. But you have pretty good odds of staying on. But please don't call anybody garbage because Facebook has its standards. And apparently they're the same as Twitter's and YouTube's.
Yeah, standards is a nice word because it sounds like they mean... implicit in the word standards is that they're good standards.
Yeah.
And they're often not.
No. Often they are not. Often they are not.
I'm going to ask real quick, is my sound synced up with my video? Because when I come up on screen, I don't look synced up to me.
It is synced up. It's synced up to me.
Okay, then that's fine.
And that's all that I care about. I care about my personal experience as the host of the show while we're doing it. Yeah, I don't know.
Because on your end is the one that ends up going out. So if I look out of sync on my end, but it's okay on yours, it's probably okay on the actual stream too.
Yeah,
that's the important thing.
In theory, the version that I am looking at in my encoder is the version that is going out. So if we're both in sync on my end, it should be in sync for people watching. But
both of whom we thank.
Both of whom we thank.
Yes.
Actually, according there are currently 22 people watching. So
nice.
So thank you to all 22 of you for not having anything better to do with your Sunday.
And for sticking around after being insulted. Although some of you may have come in a little bit late and missed that, in which case that did not happen.
Yes. Those of you who just came in, you might hear some nasty talk about how I was insulting the audience earlier. Don't believe it. And whatever you do, don't seek backwards and watch the earlier parts. It's just complete. I just told you what happened. You don't need, you should take my word for it.
Yes. We're going to do 5 minutes of Trump early here?
yeah, right. Stop going back and verifying what I said in the past to prove that what I just said wasn't true.
This report completely exonerates me. No, you may not see it.
No. What? Why do you want to see it? I just told you what was in it. Have you read it? No. Anyway.
We'll save that for later.
Atheism.
Yeah, atheism, which at its most fundamental is simply not believing in the existence of a God. And that's it. And it has come to be associated with so much more.
Yes, unfortunately. Well, I mean, some of the things it's come to be associated with are positive things. It has come to be associated in certain ways with secularism, with science education. I mean, those are good things. But yes, it's also unfortunately become associated with ironically, a lot of the same shit that is problematic with certain forms of religion. Which, yeah.
Yeah, which I've never bought atheism as a religion, but they've sort of developed the same problems.
Yeah, atheism is definitely not a religion, but certain atheists, and unfortunately some of the most famous and influential ones, they make similar errors in their thinking as certain religious people do in trying to justify their beliefs.
Yeah. So, but on the most basic level, it's simply not believing in God, and I have to say I have never really believed in God, even though most of my extended family is religious. Without going into too much family stuff, both of my parents were raised religious, and neither of them especially took to it. So my sister and I were not raised with religion. I mean, we had the option if we wanted, I suppose, but it was never pushed, and it never really became part of my belief system.
Yeah.
We've helped out when my sister and I were growing up. We'd help out during the week with vacation Bible school with family, stuff like that. But it was never something that I ascribed to. Never something that I believed there was really any merit in. I mean, even back before, one of my really early memories was back before I had even started school. I couldn't have been older than 3 or 4, and for whatever reason, it didn't normally happen, I don't think, but I was at the church during, the service, and there was Sunday school going on. I remember being in a room with a bunch of kids my own age, and it was autumn. And they opened up the blinds and looked out, and I remember the woman in the room making a comment about, look at all the pretty colors that God gave us. And even at that age, I was like, no, God gave us, no. It's even then, it didn't click. It didn't work for me. So I've never had any particular tendency to believe, and I've never seen any reason to change my mind on that. But I mean, I can actually remember that from even before starting school, a moment where something was credited to God, and I'm like, I'm not buying that.
Yeah, I remember us talking about this long ago, and you were, if not professing to be an atheist, at least like a non-believer, long before I was, or long before I was saying that about myself.
Yeah, because I remember in the place where we met, the chat room, where we had initially encountered each other, and I remember one time, so there were some regulars in the room, you and me and Caitlin were there, and some new person, like some kid who could have only been like 10, 11, 12 or something like that. And we were discussing the existence of God. And at that point, picture this poor kid thinking he's coming in and he's going to participate in a chat about Batman and characters and stuff, and walks in on the three of us discussing the existence of God. And at that point, you were the only one of us three who still believed.
Right. Right.
That kid had no chance.
No. No, it was, but when I realized that I was an atheist, which wasn't, I didn't start applying that term to myself and identifying as that until my earlier to mid 20s. And when I started to think in those terms, it was more of just sort of admitting that I had never really believed, but I had tried to believe for a very, very long time. You know, there was a part of me, because I was raised Christian. My family wasn't super religious, but we were, as I've said before, sort of nominally Christian, and that was assumed to be the way things were. You know, I think I remember my grandfather told me once, you know, I don't really go to church and I'm not religious, but I guess I believe the Bible. You know what I mean? Like okay, if something's true, it's probably that. You know, but not very much beyond that. And that's kind of how I was raised. And,
sort of a phone it in religious sort?
Yeah, just sort of like, well, one of them's got to be true. It's probably this one. You know, it's like literally, it's just sort of just an assumed sort of, general sort of belief with a very Christian flavor to it, but not devout and not attached to any specific denomination or interpretation. And that's how I was. And I tried to believe, I wanted to believe, for most of my life, mainly because I didn't want to die and I didn't want death to be the end, right? That terrified me. And that still terrifies me. Like, I don't like the idea of dying and not existing anymore just completely fucks me up. And wasn't
that a great quote? It's like, it's not the business of dying that bothers me. It's the part about staying dead that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, exactly. There's, you know, for all of his problems, Christopher Hitchens said that he described it as, it's like being at a party and knowing that you will have to leave the party and you won't be able to come back. And that's the feeling of it, you know, assuming that it's a good party, right? Yeah. I mean, maybe for some people it's a really shitty party and they're like, I can't wait to get out of this party. I don't care if I ever come back. But if you're having a good time at the party, and you're like, oh, I know I'm gonna have to leave, and I don't want to leave, and that's how it feels. Yeah. Only magnified by like 1,000.
And it might not even be your choice when you leave.
Yeah, exactly. You never know when you're gonna leave. Probably, you know. So, but I just sort of, I never actually believed, and I got to a point where I was like, I want this to be true, but I know that it's not, or at least I don't know that it is. You know, I think that's kind of the point where I'm at, where like I can't say with 100% certainty that there is no God and there is no afterlife, but I see no reason to believe that any of that is true, and I certainly can't say that I know that that's true, nor do I think that anybody could honestly say that. Yeah. So that's, you know, so we're kind of coming from the same place. It's just I was in a lot more denial than you were a lot earlier, you know.
Well, you can't. What is it they say? You can't disprove a falsehood, or you can't. Yeah. Because if something doesn't exist, you can't exactly prove that it doesn't exist. You can show that all the evidence that exists gives no indication that it's there, but you still can't technically disprove it. And so that's part of the what the arguments for God lean on heavily. That, well, you can't prove it's not. Like, the people say, well, you can't prove that there's no God. It's like, but you can't prove that there is, and I have lots of evidence that things that have been ascribed to God throughout history have much more natural and understandable and explainable reasons.
Right. It's like the Carl Sagan talking about the invisible pink dragon in his garage. You know, and anytime anyone...
Which was a parable, not a psychosis. Just
right, yes, clear. Exactly. He was making a point. He didn't actually believe he had an invisible pink dragon in his garage. But he uses it to illustrate just what you were talking about, how easy it is to construct a plausible anything if you accept unfalsifiable statements. You know, where he said, you know, I have a pink dragon in my garage. And so you go and you look in my garage, you don't see any dragon. You say, well, where's the dragon? And then I say, well, it's invisible. You can't see it. Oh, okay. Well, does it leave footprints? Oh, no, it never touches the floor. It floats. You know, like, you always have an explanation, and you can't prove that there's not a pink dragon in there, because if everything he says about it is true, then it could be. But he's given you absolutely no reason to positively believe that. He's just saying, well, you can't disprove it. Yeah. But it's still, but it's not rational to believe it. If all that he has to hang it on is, well, you can't prove that it's not there. That shouldn't be good enough, you know.
Yeah. Is anything like, what was it? There's a parable somebody written. I think it was called "Kissing Hank's Ass." I'm looking it up now. There was something about the whole thing is like, you go and James Huber had written it. It's a whole parable about you kiss Hank's ass, he'll give you $1 million. If you don't, he'll kick the shit out of you.
Yes, I've heard this. Yes,
and the whole thing is like, he's a billionaire philanthropist. He'll give you the money, and as long as you kiss his ass, but if you don't, he'll kick the shit out of you. And then there's a whole thing about you don't get it till you leave town, and then you can't come back, and so you can't report back. And the whole thing sounds like a bizarre mob shakedown. If you Google "kissing Hank's ass," it should be one of the first things that comes up. And it's the same thing. It's turning it into a different context, but exactly the same argument that you will get a benefit, but we can't prove it.
yeah, and you can't have it now.
Right, and
you have to. Yeah,
that's something that I've thought about talking about even before we started this show. I guess, is it called the hell paradox? You know, the concept of why there has to be a hell, or why Christianity has a hell. I forget what the term for it is.
There's something. Well, there's a philosophical problem called the Euthyphro dilemma, but I don't think that's quite the same thing.
But yeah, it's one of the the common questions about why, if God is all-seeing, all-forgiving, why there would be a hell in the first place.
Yeah. And the answer, at least as far as Christians that I've talked to about it, or seen or read talking about it, the answer seems to mostly be, well, that's just God's prerogative. Like, God, I'm sure God has a really good reason. So don't just accept it.
I've given that a lot of thought over time, and honestly, the whole existence of hell, it makes a lot of sense if you step out of the religion, out of the religion itself, and look at it from more of a theological or a more contextual standpoint, because I'm certainly not the first person who's decided that mostly religion is a form of social control.
Yeah.
But hell makes perfect sense when you look at it in that context. In a lot of the earlier forms of religion and gods, especially in Europe, which is mostly as a product of the American education system, the only part of the world that exists outside of America.
Yes. And
because I remember doing world cultures class, and we did all the parts on Europe, and the sections on Asia we just skipped right over. Yeah.
Oh, education.
It's world cultures, but that's not a part of the world that counts, because it's not, white Europeans. Anyway,
what did they ever do?
But you had the Greek gods and the Roman gods, and they were whole pantheons, and they were all parables of their own, and they all had different aspects, and the stories were designed to explain things that we didn't understand, that science hadn't answered yet. Like the whole thing about the seasons, and Persephone goes down, ends up having to spend half the year in hell with Hades, so everything is dead for half the year, which is why all the leaves fall off the trees. And it was their best effort to try to come up with stories to explain things that they didn't understand yet. And that's largely what religion was. There were gods. They were very human. They had flaws, very profound flaws in many cases.
Yeah.
And that's what gods were. And then, the Roman Empire was, sort of the force in Europe, and it collapsed in very short order. People don't realize, 2,000 years ago, Romans had indoor plumbing like we do, or similar to what we do.
Yeah.
But when they were laying the pipes, they wanted to figure out what to use. Iron will rust and rot through, and other things are problems. You can't make pipes out of stone, and they're trying to come up with something, and they chose a metal that was soft and would give some without breaking, and so they chose lead. And they didn't know that it was poisonous, so all the richest people who had access to indoor plumbing and water rapidly suffered from lead poisoning. And so the leadership went nuts, and the Roman Empire in very short order collapsed. And that's a large part. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that went on, but the lead poisoning was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And from there was mostly, anarchy in Europe. So at this point, how do you motivate people to be good on their own when there's really no benefit to doing so? There are some profound benefits that you can get in an anarchy, say, if you're profoundly selfish. And what ended up happening, and in a way, it's sort of a form of genius. Goodness only knows how this came about, if it was a concerted effort or whatever, but basically they redefined what gods were, and instead of having a pantheon of flawed gods, you had one perfect god, and he oversaw everything. And there wasn't necessarily anything that they could give you in life, so they decided to give you something after life. So there was heaven, and you had your eternal bliss and heaven, and everything's wonderful and nothing bad happens. But then you have to have the carrot and the stick approach. What is the flip side to that? Well, you get into heaven by being good in life, and now you've got a reward that can't be disproven. So
Right.
the stick part of it is hell, that if you misbehave, eternal torment and damnation. And you motivate people you turn their selfishness against them.
Yeah.
You behave now good, you behave good now, and you will be rewarded beyond imagination after you die. And if you are bad here and you take and you hurt other people, then you are going to be condemned for it, and you will suffer for eternity. And you take the people's innate selfishness and you turn it upside down on them. And in a way, that is really a form of genius. I mean, that is really
absolutely
brilliant. And it's a way to get people to be good and control themselves and look out for other people in a world where there was really no other forces to encourage that sort of thing. You find a way to encourage them to be good on their own. And the thing is that it was brilliant. You can make a case that it's actually kind of needed at that point. We have largely outgrown the need for it, but it's still there and still a very strong force in our society, and in many ways is very much misused.
Yeah, well, I mean, like my attitude and my sort of the way I relate to religion has changed a lot since I've been an atheist. Because, and I completely, like, I agree with everything you just said, especially about how, if you could sort of divorce yourself from it emotionally and just look at it in terms of sociology, like, it is kind of genius. And the fact that they pulled it off and continue to pull it off in every part of the world with different types of religion is, yeah, I mean, bravo, bravo. But yeah, it's something that I think the problem is we've outgrown the need, I think, for religion to be
for the driving force.
For religion, we don't need religion to explain why things work anymore, because we have science to do that, and science does a better job. Science isn't perfect, but it at least has the virtue of allowing us a decent shot at coming somewhere close to the truth about and it forces us to interrogate reality as opposed to just making things up. So we have science for that, and we have other social institutions to allow us to explore other parts of our being that are important. And we even have what I would call better forms of religion. There are forms of Christianity and Judaism and Islam that are very modern, very liberal, very progressive, very inclusive, that make a space for people who are not just members of the majority group, within the religion, who are not just hetero, who are not just cisgender, who are not of whatever the majority race is in that religious group. Like there are versions of all of those religions that do that. And I would say, from my own perspective as a progressive secular person, that those are vastly preferable to other forms of the religion. But the problem is there are still the fundamentalists in all of those faiths who are like, no, we should do things the way they used to do them. That's the way it's supposed to be done. And not only is that anti-progressive, it's also kind of dishonest, because what you find out when you do a little bit of research is what modern day fundamentalists think of as the way they used to do it, in many cases, is not the way they used to do it. For instance, with Islam, the modern concept of like jihadism that violent Muslim groups use is mostly a modern invention. I mean, it's not that there weren't wars fought over religion before. It's not that there were never instances of Muslim groups being violent or being, embarking on conquest. Of course there were, just as there were Christians. But the modern ideologies that fuel things like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and other things are not thousands of years old, or hundreds of years old, I guess, in the case of Islam, because Islam itself is not thousands of years old yet. But, they're relatively modern inventions. So they might think that they're fundamentalists doing it the way it was done back in the 600s, but that's not true. And Christian fundamentalists are the same way. They date to roughly the same time, actually, in the mid-19th century, where they decided, actually, this is the way it's supposed to be done, and this is the way it was done originally. Probably not, but they think of it in those terms, and they claim that for themselves. And that really is my problem, is that we've outgrown fundamentalism, and yet fundamentalists, they still take up so much space. And people who aren't fundamentalists, I think, afford them more deference than they deserve. You know what I mean? Like, I think you should, as long as you're not harming anyone, and as long as you're not trying to impose your version of whatever your faith is on other people, or using your faith to justify abuses, I think people should be allowed to practice their faith however they want. And if you want to be a fundamentalist, that's fine. Be a fundamentalist in your house, and But we cede space in the conversation to them, which I think is a mistake.
Well, because religion is a form of faith, and you can potentially make the argument that atheism is as well. But ultimately, it comes out it's a belief system, and this belief system is something that is sort of like in Christianity. Christianity has a belief system. The church has laid claim to it and encourages people, or sometimes orders people to behave a certain way. But faith and the church are two completely separate entities. I mean, religion is the bridge that spans them or connects them. Yeah. But they are two completely different things. Faith is a personal belief system. The church is a quasi-political or quasi-corporate organization that's basically concerned with perpetuating itself. So it's and making money in many cases. So I mean, faith and the church are two completely disparate things. Again, they have religion in common, but they're two separate things. And I think a lot of people forget that they equate the church with faith itself and with belief.
Yeah, and there are certain churches that encourage that, and unfortunately, some of the most problematic religious organizations, are like the Catholic Church, for example, is an organization that has been very ecumenical in certain ways, has reached out to other forms of Christianity, and has tried to build bridges with Eastern Christians, for example. And things are certainly a lot better as far as that goes than they have been historically. But there's still this attitude among the Catholic leadership, and among many sort of rank and file Catholics as well, who are very devout believers, that, well, yeah, okay, but ours is the true one, though. You know, like our church is religion. You know, and other churches, yeah, they're kind of doing something like this, but they don't have it right. Our church is the
one true church.
The one true church, to coin a phrase. You know, and yeah, you're right. That's a problem, and those are the kinds of things. See, that's when a lot of I think a lot of the things that atheists blame religion in general for would more accurately be ascribed to particular religious organizations. You know, like I don't think it's fair to say that religion in general is to blame for homophobia or misogyny, right? I do think that different forms of religion, different religious organizations or religious movements have absolutely been responsible for normalizing it and establishing it as an enduring part of our culture, and
absolutely,
and teaching it to new generations. You know, like this is a woman's place, and this is
perpetuating the hatred and the bigotry and the inequities.
They have absolutely been guilty of that, and still are. You know, and same thing for certain forms of Judaism, certain forms of Islam. I don't know a lot about it, but I would assume certain forms of Hinduism and certain forms of any religion. You know what I mean? Any religion that's that big and that old, I'm sure there are institutions or denominations, sects within all of those religions that perpetuate all of those things. But they didn't invent it. You know, the guy who wrote that God created woman out of man's rib in Genesis, whoever actually wrote that, they didn't invent sexism. They were putting it into a book and that eventually sort of authenticated it and legitimized it in the minds of billions of people, but they didn't invent it. You know, what religion does is it institutionalizes it, it normalizes it, and that's dangerous and that's harmful and that needs to be resisted. But it's not the same thing as saying, well, that's religion's fault.
Yeah.
You know,
and I think that's why a lot of people, especially younger people, are turning away from religion, because the things that you mentioned, like you know, homophobia and sexism and transphobia and so on, that have been pushed so hard and linked to religious groups and to the church, and that the church actually is you know, fighting for those problems.
Yeah. What
ends up happening is what they've tried to do for the longest time is to give these ideas that's the word I'm looking for, more veracity, give them more credibility by linking them to something that people believe in, the church. But what's happening is, as years and decades have gone by, the church is no longer elevating these ideas. These ideas are pulling perception of the church down significantly, and a lot of people don't want anything to do with it. You know, because if you are somebody who is not homophobic or not transphobic or not misogynist, and you see an organization very strongly promoting those things and linking itself to that and defending those things, you don't want anything to do with that organization.
No, of course not. And the churches that have decided to allow themselves to progress with the rest of society, they're the ones that aren't shedding members as seriously as other forms of Christianity. You know, if like there's a Christian denomination called the Metropolitan Community Church, which is very, very staunchly pro-gay, very inclusive of LGBTQ people, right? That's like a central part of their identity. And there's one in Hagerstown, believe it or not. And it's sort of like it's
no matter how conservative an area is, there's going to be progressive people there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's nice to have them. Like, I consider I'm an atheist. I'm sure I would disagree with them on all kinds of religious questions, but I am so happy that they're there. Because
they're helping socially.
Because they're helping socially, and because
they're not hurting people.
And the Episcopal Church is another example. Now, certain Episcopal churches aren't super progressive, or there are sort of areas of the Episcopal communion that aren't totally on board with the, you know, the LGBTQ equality thing. But generally speaking, the Episcopal Church has made a lot of strides as far as that goes. And there's an Episcopal Church in Shepherdstown, not too far from where I am, that is very inclusive, makes a point of being inclusive to LGBTQ people. And I think I see no reason to make an enemy of that. You know what I mean? Like, I see no reason to make an enemy of those people just because they believe in a God that I don't believe in. I think if we believe on all this other stuff the same, like, why wouldn't I think of these people as friends, as opposed to trying to either go after them and make them an enemy, or like implicitly insult them by saying, yeah, but your religion is homophobic. Well, but theirs isn't. You know what I mean? Like, yes,
a lot of the issues of the church are social issues. You know, they are harmful to people. They're promoting ideas that hurt people. They promote ideas that get people killed. If a church does not do that, then why does it matter? I mean, if their religion makes them a better person or promotes, you know, understanding and promotes being a better person, then why would any of that be an issue? Like, I lost my train of thought there. It's something I was going to say, and I'm trying to remember what it was. This happens to me a lot. It'll come back to me.
It's okay. Well, I was just thinking, because speaking about like how my views have changed over the years since I became an atheist. And I mean, you can even kind of, you can track this on my YouTube videos if you're ever so fucking bored that you need to watch a lot of them in a row.
And going back 7, 8, 9 years to the early ones.
Yeah. Like maybe I'm being a little too flattering to myself. Maybe I'm looking at it through rose-colored glasses, but I don't think I was ever as like harshly anti-religion as a lot of other atheists were, especially a lot of YouTube atheists. But I definitely was harsher than I am today. And I definitely was a lot more comfortable speaking in broad generalizations than I am today. You know, I was much more apt to say, well, Christianity is this, Christianity is that, Christians believe this, Christians believe that. Whereas now I try as much as I can to identify specific groups or specific ideas and specific people who promote those ideas, instead of just throwing it all under the umbrella of Christianity or Islam or Judaism or whatever. Because I just, like I said, I don't think it's fair to say to a Christian who makes a point of practicing their faith in a way that is not homophobic to say, yeah, but your religion really is homophobic, you know, and you're just doing it wrong. Like,
and this is sort of an arrogance in telling people what their religion is. It's like a form of mansplaining in a way, just in a different context.
Well, I think it's just a misunderstanding of how it works, you know, because like I said, I used to kind of think that way. I was never on board with, because there were certain people in New Atheism, who would say, you know, not only are extremists the problem, but moderates are the problem too, and in a way, you kind of see where they're going, because they talk about how, you know, moderates can make space for extremists, like moderates can make excuses for extremists and fundamentalists. And there's a certain truth to that. But at the same time, like, why do I want to treat the way that the fundamentalists and the extremists interpret the faith as the right way? because
they're always the most credible people.
Yeah, exactly. And tell the moderates that they're just doing it wrong. And that if they really practiced their faith the right way, then they would be fundamentalists and extremists too. I don't get that strategically, and I don't get that. I don't think it's fair to people. I got a comment on one of my videos. I did a video about Sam Harris a couple days ago, and one of the comments I got on it was from someone who said, because one of the points I make in the video is, well, religion and even specific religious doctrines and scriptures are open to interpretation. And so this person commented, and they quoted one of the really, really like homophobic parts of the Bible from Deuteronomy, I think, or, you know, like if man lies with man as with woman, it is an abomination, right?
Yeah, the same book that says that wearing cloth from two separate sources is of two different materials at the same time is equally an abomination. Getting a tattoo and eating shellfish, you know, all the stuff that people really follow at the same time. Exactly.
The part that says don't eat lobster, how's that working out? Good luck with that. Yeah, and he said, he quoted this, what I admittedly, I read that as pretty homophobic as well, right? And he said, well, how are we supposed to interpret that? And I said, well, that's not the right question. Like, that's not the point. You shouldn't be demanding that anyone tell you how to interpret it. The point is, you interpret it one way, I interpret it one way. Like I said, the way I read it, yeah, that sounds pretty homophobic. I'm not sure how you would get around that. I'm not sure for me how I would be a Christian and be accepting of gay people and not feel that I was in contradiction with that thing that is in what I believe to be the Word of God. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But people do it. Like, there are Christians who are sincere, earnest believers, just as sincere and earnest as fundamentalists. You know, that's another thing I don't like. You're saying that, well, their faith isn't as sincere as a fundamentalist. They're not as devout as a fundamentalist. I think that's such horseshit and so dangerous to say, well, only the crazy people are truly faithful. You know, only the murderers and the violent ones are truly faithful.
There's a heavy judgment in looking at things that way, that the worst of a group is representative of the group.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. Yeah,
because I mean, they're I'm not getting into the community, but some of the most prominent atheists are not exactly the most ethical or respectable atheists.
No,
but they are not the people who are doing atheism correctly, quote unquote.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a good idea, generally speaking, to judge an entire group by its most violent, most extreme members, especially when those members don't even account for a majority of that group. But yeah, I mean, it just makes no sense to me to say that, well, they're doing it wrong. I might not see how you get there, obviously, but clearly people get there. And I think that their faith and their connection to their religion, and however they read their scriptures to get to that point that they're at, deserves respect. And just for practical purposes, I don't want to piss off people who are on my side for 99% of things. You know, like that was one of the major epiphanies I had in my sort of evolution of my atheism and how it relates to other parts of my beliefs, is that if the only major thing we disagree on is the existence of God, I don't give a shit.
Right, because I've said I agree with that, because I've said for a while that to some extent I look at the primary purpose of a religion as the social, as the ethical, trying to encourage people to behave better and in a better way. And so I've long referred to religion in a way as a crutch, which a lot of people are offended by, but it's not meant as an insult. I mean, if you have a broken leg and you can't get around, a crutch is a tool that aids you to be more functional, be able to get around, to be able to do more things.
Right.
I look at religion as sort of a crutch for morality in a way, because I remember even back in high school being on the baseball team, which I've been terrible at, but we were they would do the prayer at the beginning or whatever, and I didn't do it, and it came out that I was atheist, and I got a lot of grief for that. But I remember somebody saying, "Boy, if I didn't believe in God, the things that I would do," and I'm thinking, that's just terrible. You're just saying that you're a garbage human being, and the only thing, again, that's why I sort of came to believe that the whole point of the religion was to convince people to police themselves. But the thought that in that case, I can't look at religion as a bad thing, because he is basically openly saying that he is a more ethical and well-behaved person and not a full criminal because of religion. It's a crutch that makes him a more moral person, and that is a good thing. And it's so referring to religion as a crutch is not meant as a disparagement on that religion or that faith. Or that belief. It's meant as you are a better, more functional person for having religion in your life. And atheists are people who reach that point of morality without needing that particular crutch.
Yeah, I think it's important. It can be a good exercise in staying in your lane. Because I would say in my head, and maybe if we were having a conversation about it, and I wasn't just being a jerk and sort of inserting this into a conversation where it didn't belong, if I were to talk to that person you were describing, my belief is, in most cases, not in all cases, certainly, but in most cases, I think people who lead moral lives, who say that they are leading their moral lives because of their religion, would still be just as moral if their religion wasn't there. Right? If you are someone who respects the rights of other people and tries to be kind and tries to be nice and tries to give people the benefit of the doubt unless you have a reason not to, I think that's not just because you believe in God and you believe you'll go to hell if you don't do that, or you believe that, you know, there's some kind of mandate from on high telling you to do it. Like I think you probably would be the same person that you are. But at the same time, it's not for me to tell you that. You know what I mean? It's not for me to put that on you and say, as though I'm saying, so therefore you should drop the religion. Because if you're not hurting anybody and you're a good person, I could not care less. And I have no motivation whatsoever to change that about you. You know, I have no motivation to evangelize atheism. I want to evangelize equality and tolerance and social justice, whatever form that takes. I don't care what religion you are, as long as you do right by people. You know?
Because, like, I've gone back and forth on things, because we see, you know, the religious extremists and the damage they do, but then you have people who, like that person on the baseball team, who didn't even realize what he was sort of tacitly admitting to when he said that he's a better person for having religion. And I've gone back and forth in the concept that if religion were gone, people were made better by it would become worse, but people made worse by it would become better, and it would likely balance out to no significant change. And I go back and forth on that, because it's impossible to measure that. You know, so I'm not certain how true that is. I've believed it fervently for a long time. I'm a little shakier on it now than I used to be.
Yeah,
it's one of those things that sort of comes into the Occam's razor, that it might be better just you know, to not multiply entities unnecessarily, and we can still have all the same issues and things without bringing religion into it.
Yeah,
because because one thing that gets me is, you know, again, using the church to enforce morality or ethics, or what is right and wrong. And you talk about some churches are homophobic and some are very inclusive. It's very hard for me to put any credibility into claims that this is what we should do because the church says so. Mm-hmm. Not only given their incredible hypocrisy on a number of fronts, but also given the fact that if people discover that their church is taking positions that they don't like, they don't say, well, I'm going to have to change. What they do is they go to a different church that agrees with everything that they already believe in.
That's true.
So they're not, the church doesn't define their beliefs. They just find a church that fits what they choose to believe anyway, and then they ascribe their bigotry to what God wants to try to clear themselves of responsibility for it.
That's very true. That's a good point. And it ties into something that I think too, which is, and because I think I agree with you. I agree with the general concept of what you described there when you said, you know, the people who were made better by it would be worse, and the people who were made worse by it would be better. Like, I don't know if it would be like an exact flip-flop like that, but I believe generally that if somebody waved a magic wand and religion was gone tomorrow, it would probably help some things and it would probably hurt some things. And yeah, it would not be the panacea that a lot of our fellow atheists, I think, extremely naively believe that it would be. Like, right. I know like
people look at 9/11 as what can happen with religion, and on one level there is truth to that, but on the other, to simply blame it on religion is to overlook the long history of America's interference in the Middle East, that region of the world, and the things that we've done to the people we've killed, the governments we've overthrown. The grievance is a lot larger than simply a religious belief. Religion might be what largely weaponized it in that case, but the hostility toward America, because of the way that people have been treated over there by American foreign policy, by different agencies within American government, by the democratically elected governments that have been overthrown by America for our business interests. There are a lot of valid grievances that people in that region of the world have against the United States, and simply saying, well, the religion is evil and that's why that happened, is to not only completely ridiculous, but completely unfair. And it's a way to simply pretend that there is no guilt on or no responsibility on our end for the problems that are over there. It's saying that the grievances that they have are ridiculous and that there's no basis to them, which is completely untrue. They have a lot of reason to be upset with us.
Yeah,
that doesn't justify 9/11 by any stretch of the imagination, no. But you have to understand that the broader context, that this did not happen in isolation. This was just not a couple of people who had a bad day and decided they were going to do something terrible to get back at us. This is something that has been festering for decades and is not getting much better.
Yeah, and the political motivations that they had carried weight in that decision. They didn't do it just for religious reasons. I think it's probably more fair to say that, like, for instance, the terrorists who carried out 9/11, that their mission was sort of pitched to them and accepted in religious terms, but...
Yeah, and America promoted that to help with their response.
Yeah, but it wasn't...
They are radicals motivated by religious fervor.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot more to what happened than religious fervor.
Yeah, there's a lot of political stuff underneath there as well. A lot. Which, in fact, may be one of the main factors that causes them to see their religion the way they see it. Whereas other people under the same religious umbrella of Islam, who believe in the same prophets and read the same book, interpret their religion in a very, very different way. You know, that's another thing about that I think is kind of simplistic and naive, is that people pretend that factors other than religion have no influence on how people practice their religion. You know, like
indeed.
I mean, like, because like
you're a product of your experiences, and you see things through that filter. And if you have on an issue, if you haven't really experienced something that, you know, like, you know, if America bombs like every, is there any country in the Middle East that we haven't bombed at one point or another?
I don't know. Have we bombed Saudi Arabia? I don't think we
probably
have.
At some point.
Maybe before they found the oil. We probably bombed them before they found the oil, and then we
probably
like,
haven't.
hey.
We probably haven't bombed Israel. We just give them our weapons, let them bomb people over there for us.
We sell them the bombs, and they take care of it themselves.
Right, which is another reason why they don't particularly like us. But when you have something like that, you're going to look at when your life is death from the sky at any time. You know, when America bombs an aspirin factory because our intelligence misidentifies what's going on there, we think it's suspicious, we're just going to destroy it rather than figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, then certain parts of your religious book that talk about taking the fight to your enemies suddenly will seem a lot more reasonable and appealing than if, you know, you hadn't had your family killed for absolutely no reason that you can understand. If you're just living your life the way you want to live it and trying to mind your own business and be a good person, and the next day, you know, you get carpet bombed, you know, that's going to have an effect on you.
Yeah, you know, I don't remember the sociology class in college, and granted, my degree was not in sociology, so I didn't study it as much as a lot of other people have. But I've never heard anybody say, "Well, everybody got along great, and then came religion." You know what I mean? Like most of the sources of conflict and tension that are exacerbated by certain types of religion pre-exist religion. Like, you know, like there's a thing that, one of the many things that Sam Harris has said that I left out of my video because there just wasn't time, and the video ended up being over 30 minutes as it was he said...
Well, there's a lot of bad things to say about Sam Harris.
There's so many bad things to say about Sam Harris. One of the things was, he said, I can't remember if someone asked him this, or, as is often the case, he just took it upon himself to say this because he's just such a fucking horrible person. But he said that if he had a choice between getting rid of rape and getting rid of religion, he would choose to get rid of religion without hesitation. And that, to me, is not...
Because rape is a problem that he doesn't think affects him, so
yeah, well,
it's other people's problems, so he can...
Yeah, and so...
Unenlightened self-interest.
Oh my God, what a perfect way to put it. Unenlightened self-interest. But it's just, it boggles the mind, because do you really think that if you got rid of religion, that all of the things that people do to each other that they ascribe to religion would just go away? I'm pretty sure that if homophobic people no longer, if homophobic religions just vanished into thin air tomorrow, I'm pretty sure homophobic people wouldn't all of a sudden become tolerant and accepting. They would just appeal to other shit. They would appeal to the naturalistic fallacy. They would say like, well, that's not the way it is in nature. It's not right. You're just not supposed to be that way, which is basically what they do now. They just point to God when they do it. Mm-hmm. They just wouldn't be able to do that anymore. People who are sexists, who are misogynists, they would, they're like, and look no further than the atheist community. There are plenty of people who reject religion in all its forms, and in some cases are downright hostile to all forms of religion, who are just as racist and homophobic and transphobic and misogynistic as any religious person. Mm-hmm. These things it wouldn't just go away. It's so incredibly naive.
All it would do is eliminate the fallacy or the delusion that people are proxies for God's bigotry.
Exactly. It would not, it would not fix nearly as many things as people think it would. It would take away certain things that we fight with each other about, but I am not so optimistic as to believe that we would not very soon find other things to fight about. And
well, there's always, and the hatred doesn't go away because, like we've talked about very recently, when the Supreme Court ruling that legalized gay marriage, that gay people could marry, and that it wasn't something that you could ban, that you couldn't do civil unions instead. Yeah. Once that passed, basically every single argument that was used against gay people, something got transferred over to trans people, and the hatred continued unabated. They just shifted their target and continued exactly the same thing they've been doing all along. Exactly.
Which is the same thing they did to gay people after interracial marriage became legalized and normalized. Yep. It's the same arguments. It's the exact same arguments.
Yeah, the hatred is there. They just find another target and another excuse because hate is the purpose.
Yeah.
Hate is almost a drug for some people.
Yeah, it's like an instinctive thing, it's a reflexive reaction, I think. And again, I feel like it predates religion. You know what I mean? Like unfortunately, I think it's a part of human nature that we are naturally suspicious and fearful of people that we deem to be outsiders, of people that we deem for whatever reason to be not like us. And religion can take that and really, really toxify it even more and give it like an air of legitimacy and say, well, yeah, things are this way because that's how God wants them. And those people over there, you're right, they are bad people because they don't believe in the right God, or because they practice a way that God condemns, or whatever.
They eat meat on the wrong day of the week, which is the sort of thing that God would be very concerned about, yes. I'm sure.
The sort of thing that the God who created the universe would be very upset about. But but all of that shit was already there. Religion didn't invent it. It's not like a priest walked into town and said, you're supposed to hate gay people, right?
And everybody, like, yeah. Oh, okay, well, I'll stop being tolerant then.
Yeah. You sure? Because I love gay people. I'm pretty sure they weren't like that, And
you gotta, a lot of these bigotries, you sort of have to get into their heads early because, kids are a lot more susceptible to these things.
Yeah.
Or, a lot less aware, which is why religion is very much geographical. If you're in an area that's predominantly Christian, odds are you're going to be a Christian, right, simply because that's what you learn. It's not based on any sense of right or wrong of one religion over another. It's simply what you know and what you've been taught. And so the same thing. I mean, what was that line? The one Jethro Tolstoy says, how dare you tell me I'm my father's son when that was just an accident of birth?
Yeah.
It's where if you're in a Christian area, you're going to most likely be a Christian, and so on. And so, and when you start teaching kids that from very, very early, it becomes instinctive and reflexive, and they don't question. They grow up the same way. And then you have things like people who are like you said you were, but who won't question themselves or won't say, well, you know what, if I have these doubts, I'm not going to believe it anymore. Because I've heard phrases where people say, better a half-assed Christian than no Christian at all, because they just desperately cling to the sense of religion, and I guess perhaps the sense of community and that goes with it, rather than simply think for themselves, which is a much, much harder and more painful thing to do.
Yeah. I think there's a false sense of permanence and a false sense of being done as a person that I think is frequently found in a lot of religious people and a lot of non-religious people too, where you feel like you're like, okay, I'm done maturing. I'm done learning. I'm done growing. The things I believe now, the way my personality is now, the way I behave now is just the way I'm supposed to be. And any suggestion that I should change is unacceptable. You know?
Well, if you believe the same thing now, all the same things now that you believed 10 years ago, then you've wasted 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But I think that is very prevalent in the minds of a lot of people. And it's something, and it's something that I think those of us who try not to be that way have to actively resist. You have to make an effort to be open. Like when somebody comes to you and says, you really shouldn't have said that, or this thing that you do, I've noticed you do this thing, you really shouldn't do that. Like you have to force yourself to be open to it and to say, I'm going to listen to this. I'm sure that this person isn't just making it up, or is just saying it just to be difficult. Because it takes a lot of guts to go up to a person and tell them something about themselves that they won't want to hear. So in most cases, people who do that to you are not doing it just to fuck with you or just in bad faith, but you have to tell yourself, okay, I need to take this seriously. I need to look at this because I'm not fully baked yet. You know what I mean? Like I'm not completely done.
But digging your heels in is easy. Taking a step is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Shall we segue into the other topic we wanted to
because
cover?
we're about an hour in, so we should probably move on before we run out of time. Not that we can technically run out of time, because we can go as long as we want, but we don't want to try people's patience too much.
Yeah. We have another
especially since we haven't gotten to what you've titled this episode yet.
Yes, that's right. Those of you sharp-eyed viewers will notice this episode is titled "Let's All Jump into a Black Hole," and that is because, as I'm sure a lot of people...
It was a metaphor for religion?
Exactly.
Oh boy,
that's the kind of judgmental talk I'm trying to avoid. How dare you? No, so as a lot of you probably know already, there was a big news story over the past week or so where some scientists generated, I guess you would say, because we tend to sort of simplify this process. It's not like they just took a picture with a camera of a black hole. They compiled a lot of data that had been gathered about this particular point in space, and they put together what is being called the first actual image of a black hole. And I'll show it to you. I have it pulled up in my web browser here. This is the image. This is the what is being called the first image of a black hole.
And yeah, the scale on that, XKCD did a image of that, where that black spot in the center, you can put the sun in the center of that, and then you can put Pluto's orbit inside that, and then about 2 or 3 times further than that, Voyager 1, which has been moving away from Earth for like over 40 years, and it's still not out of that black area in the center.
Yeah,
I mean, so that is a huge area.
This is a massive object. Yeah. And
this is talking about the universe that God created, and this is a part of it. We're talking about that before. God created the entire universe just for humans. Yeah, I don't know. That strains credibility a bit when you look at what's out there.
A little bit, yeah. But yeah, so this was a big deal, and this was really cool. And you mentioned it when we were talking beforehand, before we started. If I was still doing my And Now the Good News series, this would definitely be the lead story for one of those videos, because this is just like catnip to me. Like, I love this shit, and this is so exciting to see something like this. So of course people had to ruin it.
Right. So that brings us into one of our recurring segments, unfortunately. You have that ready?
I have it ready.
Here we go.
Oh.
And we're going to discuss who's garbage now. Specifically, the people who are very much criticizing this because of the fact that a woman was involved and they don't believe that she had anything to do with it, or refuse to accept it.
Exactly.
And I don't actually have her name up, and I'm drawing a blank now.
Her name is Katie Bauman.
Yeah, I remembered the Katie. I couldn't remember the last name.
Yeah, and she is here. Actually, I have a story about it up on in my web browser here. This is from The Verge, and the title is "Online Trolls Are Harassing a Scientist Who Helped Take the First Picture of a Black Hole." And that's her, and her name is Katie Bauman, and she's only 29, which is remarkable to me. She's almost 10 years younger than I am, and she has already played a very important role in creating the first image of a black hole. So good for you. She is the computer programmer who helped to sort of collate the data and create this picture. You might have seen another photograph of her where she's standing next to just this huge pile of hard drives.
Yeah.
That is just all the data that went into making that one picture. It's really remarkable. And she did a lot. And of course, people are giving her credit for it because she had a very leading role in it. And there are people who are basically offended who are garbage, who are offended at the very suggestion that a woman might have done something scientifically significant, and are trying everything they can to either diminish her contribution or to question the motives of people who are celebrating her, saying like, well, they're just mentioning her because they're so desperate for a woman to do something. They just want to give a woman a pat on the back so much that they're exaggerating the role that she played. So either way, the people who do that are terrible and they suck. But yeah.
I read the one person was saying like they're giving her credit even though one of the other guys on it wrote near like 800,000 lines of code for this, and the guy they named said, I did not write anywhere near that much code for this project. And people are saying, well, he's just saying that to, flatter her because he wants to get into her pants. And he's like, no, I'm gay. And none of this is having any impact on the critics because it's not about the reasons or the logic. It's just about trashing a woman.
Yeah. One of my favorite complaints that I've seen made in relation to Katie Bauman, but I've also seen people just generally complaining about it. And it's like such a perfect example of the dipshit, clueless entitlement that people have. There are people actually complaining that the image of the black hole wasn't better. It's the first actual image of a black hole
better
ever.
Based on what? What are they comparing that to?
I don't know. Some fucking...
I can't see the star base in orbit? What?
Yeah, it doesn't look that way in Celestia. Well, you know what? I mean, it's like what will make you motherfuckers happy?
I saw the movie The Black Hole, and that doesn't look anything like it.
I want full motion video. I want to see like blue jets of matter shooting out of it, and I want to see the swirling of the accretion disk, and anything less than that is unacceptable.
Oh, you're suggesting that the people who are criticizing this have any idea what the term accretion disk means.
That's true. Accretion disk.
A highfalutin talk.
You sound like you've been to college, boy.
Yes, because education is now considered a mark of shame.
Yes, that's the way forward for our country.
Speaking of way forward for our country.
Oh, hey.
Nice segue. The other person for who's garbage now, we're tossing in Joe Biden.
Oh, Uncle Joe, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so, Joe.
I am so much happier with. I missed the Onion version of him more than I actually missed him.
Oh God, the Onion Joe Biden is amazing. Is like a Hall of Fame character. Yeah. So Joe Biden, and of course he's garbage for the reason that most men who have been recently revealed to be garbage have turned out to be garbage, because he's a complete creep when it comes to relating to women. He's just a little too touchy. He's a little too touchy when it comes to interacting with women.
And when called out on it, rather than acknowledging that there could possibly be some sort of issue with his behavior that potentially could be addressed, he just doubles down on it.
Yeah. I said on my live stream week before last that I had not yet watched his apology video, so I was kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt. But he doesn't really. It doesn't. I don't think he gets it. Or
a Vic Manania apology.
Yeah. Or he does get it, but he's just, he's intentionally not letting us, you know what I mean? Like, he's not owning up to it. He's not admitting that what he did was wrong. It's kind of like, well, it turns out some people weren't comfortable with it. You know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, okay, we need more than that, though. Like, you can't just say, you know, because you know what? It's almost like the sort of petulant response of, you know, like, well, then I guess I just won't hug anybody. You know what I mean? Like, somehow you're the victim. Like you've been put upon in this whole thing. Well, I guess I just won't be nice to anybody from now on. Is that what you want? I hope that'll make you happy. I just won't hug anybody. You know? It's like that. Oh, God. Like,
you gonna throw your pudding across the room next?
Oh. Yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay. And I mean, this is one of those things where I sort of had to make an effort to care about this. Not because I didn't think that what he did was bad, because obviously I think what he did was bad, and I'm completely on the side of the women who came forward and called him out on this. And I think, you know, I'm not on the Joe Biden train for this at all. And I think things like this are important to talk about, especially when it's someone as prominent as Joe Biden. But I mean, I don't think we should be electing Joe Biden president anyway.
Right.
Not because
of course, I've been saying right along that I think if Democrats nominate another white man for president, it's showing they're very much missing the point of the last several years.
Well, and it's like, apart...
And he's not the new guard either. He's not the future of the party.
That's it. That's my main beef. It's apart from this sexual misconduct thing, if we can just sort of put that off to the side for a moment, like even before I knew about that, Biden shouldn't be the guy. Yeah, because he's old guard. He first of all, not to be ageist or anything, but he's an older guy. He's served his country already. He was in the Senate and the House for something like 30 or 40 years. He was 8 years vice president. He's done. He's done.
And he's done his bit for king and country, so to speak.
Yes. Let him go home and find someone who has never, preferably who has never even been a prominent candidate for president. You know, not like the second or third place finisher from last time. Just someone who has, you know, like the major contenders right now. Maybe a senator or a congressperson or someone who has been prominent in politics but has never been a major candidate. As
opposed to, say, Hillary Clinton, because, you know, whether you like her or hate her, and it's sort of like I'm at the point where, as far as political life goes, I just want the Clintons to go away.
Yeah,
you've been there, my entire life. It's been the Clintons. It's been since like 1992. So we're approaching, what's that? We're approaching 30 years of Clintons being prominent in politics, and it's like, step aside.
Yeah,
step aside. Fresh blood.
I don't think it should be. Hillary
Alexandria
Clinton.
Ocasio-Cortez is really making waves and making a difference, and people like her are the future of the party, not you.
Yeah.
No offense. I mean, you've done good things, but enough.
Step aside, yeah. I don't think it should be Hillary Clinton. I don't think it should be Bernie Sanders. I don't think it should be someone from last time. I think it should be a fresh person, a new person. Like you said, the new guard. Like, I feel like that's something the Democratic Party desperately needs to steer into that. You know, people like it was such a big deal this past election when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and all these young people,
women won, and and non-white people won, and non-Christian people won.
And that's something that the party should be saying. This is who we are going to be. You know,
but the party is actually doubling down on the exact opposite, on being very Republican in who they're willing to support, and
being so chicken shit in standing up for Ilhan Omar, which I'm sure I want to get to that when we do 5 Minutes of Trump pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, Biden should not be the guy, regardless of whether he's a creep with women or not. Like, we should not be even seriously considering that. Even if you have a positive view. And look, apart from the being a creep with women thing, which definitely tarnishes him in a big way. But like, I didn't have a huge problem with Biden. I thought he was fine. I thought he was a fine vice president. I thought he did a good job. He was a likable guy. But no.
And for the most part, he still is.
For the most part, he still is.
It's just a matter of change. Change is hard. But we need change, because what we've been doing since Reagan swept his changes in is clearly not working. We need to do something different as a country.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing that I feel like even very successful, very prominent Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, like Charles Schumer, who again, for the most part, I don't have like major disagreements with. They aren't necessarily the ideal people for me, but I don't have major disagreements with them. But they
God, they're terrified of change too.
They're terrified of change, and they're opposed now by a Republican Party, and have been for a long time, that is determined to do anything it can to tear down everything that the Democratic Party has put up over the last 50 years. And they have made no secret about it. They're completely out in the open about it now. They're not even pretending anymore. They want to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. They want to pack the Supreme Court with right-wingers. They want to get rid of Roe v. Wade.
Should we segue this into 5 minutes of Trump, since this is also the same thing?
Yeah, fuck it. Hey, 5 minutes of Trump, everybody. And
can I make a request here? Since you've been going with the white background, since we're talking about 5 minutes of Trump, can you possibly turn that to like the blood red of the Republican Party and Satan in the background?
Oh man, I don't think I can do that on such short notice. But I think let me see. Let me start the countdown timer and let's just see how it shows up, because I think I have a drop shadow behind it. You should still be able to see it when I cut to me. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, like that. Fancy. But anyway, okay. Anyway, yeah. So.
The Republican Party is tearing down everything the Democrats have done in the last 50 years, from the Voting Rights Act to the Civil Rights Act, everything.
Yeah. Same-sex marriage, gay equality, trans equality. The trans military ban went into effect on Friday. Like they are doing everything they can to destroy everything that the Democratic Party and people more progressive than the Democratic Party working through that party have tried to build. And the Democrats are not taking it seriously at all.
Yeah, because speaking of Reagan's legacy, it's culminated in what we've got now, Trump. I mean, this would have been Trump would. People, even during the last election, they thought it was laughable that he could win. But hey, this is where the Republican Party is. Yeah,
he is the logical progression of what the Republican Party has been for the last 50 years. He's on the same spectrum as Nixon and Reagan and Bush.
Yeah. Every election, the Republicans send somebody out there. It's like, boy, it couldn't do any worse than this. And I shudder to think that now, because we've gotten to Trump, but I can't. I'm horrified to think where they're going to go from here.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Ilhan Omar thing, because I mention it briefly in my Facepalm 5 video tomorrow, but I feel like I probably gave it the short shrift because there's so much other things to talk about. But let's just
you can edit in to come back to this video and tune in at this timestamp to get more detail.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, because you can't underline this boldly enough. The President of the United States, the sitting president, is engaging in the incitement of violence and hatred against a member of Congress who has received death threats. The president is participating in that and egging it on. And for the life of me, I cannot imagine why anybody, regardless of what political persuasion you happen to be, would think that that was an acceptable thing. And yet here we are. Here we sit, you know. And to the point where there are even a lot of prominent Democrats who have not said fucking boo about it.
Well, kind of like we were talking about how the church has taken over the concept of faith. You know, and people support the church rather than faith, or what is right or wrong. A lot of people will support the Republican Party, whatever they do. And if it's Trump, then they'll back Trump, regardless of what he says or what that means ethically or politically. It doesn't matter. The logic, the facts are no longer relevant to many of these people. It's party above all.
Yeah,
which is a very scary concept. That is not what America is supposed to be. That's what happens in countries that we pride ourselves on being much different and better than.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was somebody, a relatively prominent American at some point in our history, who warned us about this very thing. What was his name? George Washington. In his farewell address, said, "Watch out for political parties, because people will be more loyal to them than they will be to the good of the country." Good thing that didn't turn out to be the truth, huh? Good thing we didn't go down that road.
I'm thinking that the moment you started talking there, you actually remember George Washington's name.
Yeah,
just pretending you didn't.
Yeah, I was acting. I was doing, you know, it was
unlike the Stephen Stuffy videos where you're just being yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the real me. It's a rhetorical device, see, and that's another thing that I've discovered over the years as a YouTuber. There's so many people who don't know what rhetorical devices are. Like, Like, why did you say that if you didn't mean it? Anyway, yeah, so the Ilhan Omar thing is just, I
wish you could get through to people what Trump is doing to say, if Obama did this, would you be okay with it?
Exactly. If Obama did something that was 1/10 as bad, you would not be okay with it. You'd be calling for his impeachment. And by the way, the whole thing about, the Republicans are siding with Trump no matter what. If you recall, that's the exact opposite of what a lot of the people said would happen when they were trying to placate us and trying to say, oh, you're making too big of a deal out of it when Trump was elected. And we were like, well, there goes the neighborhood. And there are all these people, including liberals and centrists, who are like, now just calm down. It won't be that bad. Trump is only one person. There's going to be adults in the room. There's going to be people that will rein him in. There's going to be people that will force him to focus on, it's like, okay, well, where the fuck are these people? It turns out they're the people who are enabling him and apologizing and defending everything he does.
It's like a couple of years ago, I posted something on Facebook, link from CNN where it goes, Democratic leadership or Democratic leader trusts McConnell to keep his word. And I'm like, you've learned nothing.
Yeah, like what did I just say?
And time is up.
Time is up. Yeah, so I want to...
The screen did not go red.
No.
But you probably have to go down and manually switch the settings.
Yeah, I'll have to go into the settings and fix it. I can fix that maybe for next time. But but yeah, I didn't go into detail about it because I didn't want to take more time out of the 5 minutes. But there was there's a bit near the end of my Sam Harris video where I play a really, really horrible clip from his podcast where it's him and this right-wing asshole named Douglas Murray basically like just shitting on trans people and having a giggle about it. And
sort of like the Reagan administration did about the whole concept of HIV and AIDS in the early going, which we look back in shame now, but at the time it seemed, hey, people are dying. That's funny.
Yeah, exactly. And
so I'm sure we'll look back on Sam Harris as fondly for that. Anyway,
so I play that clip, and then right after that, when I come back in the video, I basically say, so what's the context that makes that okay? Because Sam Harris's number one complaint about people who criticize him is they're taking me out of context. So I say, okay, so there's two grown men giggling at denigrating and dehumanizing trans people for 3 minutes that I played. It went on for longer than that. I only played about 3 minutes of it. So what's the context I'm missing that makes that okay? And then in the comments, I made a pinned. Of course. First of all, I put a pinned comment up that said, anybody who posts anything transphobic, I'm deleting your comment and banning you. Like take that somewhere else. Fuck that.
And people are like, oh, Steve's banning people again.
Well, they were. Yeah, of course they were. But there were a couple people who specifically said, well, why did you ask us about what the context was that made it okay if you didn't want us to reply? And I didn't say anything to that. I just deleted the comment because fuck that person. But it's, do you know what a rhetorical device is? Do you know what a rhetorical question is? When I say, what's the context that could possibly make that okay? I'm trusting you to be smart enough to be able to tell that what I mean is there is no context that makes that okay. Right? You can tell from the context and the tone of voice of what I'm saying that that's the message I'm trying to send. Right?
That's the same mindset with that video where you're like, well, even if all the ice melted, the shoreline wouldn't be Ohio.
Yes. Oh, that's my favorite. And it took about 3 weeks for somebody to leave that comment. But I was so happy that it came because I knew it would. It was like vindication. Okay. So yeah, in my last proper Trek Actually video, there's a joke where future me comes back from 20 years in the future. And there's a joke where he says that he lives in Ohio because Ohio is now the East Coast and everything east of Ohio is underwater. And I got a comment from someone saying, well, even if all the ice on the planet melted, the seas wouldn't rise that high. It would never be the East Coast would never be completely underwater. And I was just like, I knew it. Like, I knew you would be here. I knew you would take the joke that me in costume as 20 years older me from the future said in a Star Trek
with your face
video.
Covered in shoe polish to make your hair gray.
Yes, with beard white all over me, right? I knew someone would see that and say, that's technically inaccurate.
Which is a sort of sophistry that people use to try to avoid the fundamental point of things. When you pick on the tiny little errors that aren't meant to be taken seriously because you know that you cannot address the main issue because you are wrong and they are right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just one of the, I don't know. And it's always the people who fancy themselves as smarter than you are. And it's not that
I am using facts to refute what you are saying in this video.
Yes,
I'm smart.
I am using facts to refute the rhetorical question that you asked, because I completely missed the point you were trying to make with that rhetorical question. I am the smart one. Yeah, I don't know, but I had to mention that because that's the recent example of it that I've been sort of giggling about. Like, okay, fine. If I guess you really thought I was asking for your input on that. Okay.
Did people actually try to give you context, or did they just complain that?
No, yes, some people did. Some people did. Most of it was just complaining about how I'm totalitarian because
Trump isn't.
Yeah, I'm totalitarian because I delete hateful comments from my comment section, because I would rather other viewers of mine who want to peruse the comments not have to be confronted with hateful, ignorant things that other people say about them. In some cases, if it's a trans person, for instance, who is perusing the comments. But there were people who did actually try to put it in context. There was one, I got one today from someone who said, well, here's the context. The context is that Sam Harris, he was just laughing at what Douglas Murray was saying because Murray was going so far over the line. And Harris, he was just laughing at just how outrageous it was.
Oh, so when people are crossing lines, what you do is laugh so they don't feel uncomfortable rather than call them out on advocating for the death of other people.
Yeah, and also, so I guess that's why after...
Osama bin Laden, I laughed when 9/11 happened. The scamp just went a little too far.
Yeah.
No.
And
these people, it's just... They're not even realistically trying. They're just anything that they can throw out there. It's a joke is the most bullshit excuse for these things.
Yeah, because jokes don't have magic properties. Like if someone is offended by a joke, it's the same as if they were offended by a non-joke. You handle it the same way. Sometimes maybe you decide that the offense isn't warranted. Sometimes it is. It's not automatically unwarranted because it's a joke. That's to me is the fallacy.
Like the people are like, well, go out and kill abortion doctors. I'm kidding. No, you're not.
Yeah,
no, you're not.
You're
not
that
joking.
Shit. Yeah. I mean, it's, and the other thing, speaking of the importance of context, right? Toward the end of that clip, after Douglas Murray is done going off on his transphobic rant, Sam Harris, who has been laughing about it the entire time, says, "That's hilarious," and then he compliments Douglas Murray for being able to go off on a rant like that. And he says, I wish I could do that. I don't have that gear in my brain that allows me to summon that level of animus and ire on topics like this. But I wish that I could.
That's clearly a joke, because clearly he is capable of being that hateful.
Get him started on Muslims once. Maybe he doesn't have that gear for trans people. He likes to keep his hatred of trans people low key. By, for instance, just having hateful people about trans folks on his show and letting them talk for an hour and just giggling along. That's how Harris handles transphobia. But with Islamophobia, he'll fucking dive right in.
I'll give you the platform, and then it's not me. I've got a proxy.
Yeah, exactly.
Since he can't use God as his proxy, he can't be a proxy for God. He's going to use something else.
But yeah, so I don't know. That's for the people who are like, "Oh, context is very important." Okay, well.
Yeah, their context is very important, but in some cases, the context is that they're just a horrible, hateful person.
Exactly. Exactly. The context bears out the fact that he's a dick. So anyway, now usually this is the time of the show when we're in the closing minutes when we talk about something nerdy, and the thing nerdy I have to talk about is, again, it's unfair to you because you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But. I wanted to make mention of the fact that we finally got to see the bridge of the USS Enterprise on the most recent episode of Star Trek Discovery. And we
and
got
I understand that the orgasm you had alarmed seismologists up and down the East Coast.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. I mean, so I talked about this. I know I mentioned it. I've been very fortunate to have been invited to be a guest on Anita Sarkeesian and Ebony Adams's Feminist Frequency Star Trek Discovery recap podcast twice now, and I think you
have the combination of being on the right side of issues regarding games and generations, and being very prominently knowledgeable about Star Trek and
so
much of minutia.
Yeah, so it's perfect. And I know I think I mentioned it both times, but I know I mentioned it the most recent time. And I've also mentioned it in my own videos that maybe my favorite thing about the show is the way it looks. I love the design. I love the aesthetic. I love the set design. I love everything about the way Star Trek Discovery looks. And when they show us their version of the Enterprise, it was so much better than
at the end of season 1, when you see the Enterprise, right? On one level, my thought is, Star Trek is defined by both they going where no man has gone before. Why do they keep going back to exact same places?
Yeah, that's a fair point. But at the same time,
the Enterprise that showed up at the end of season 1 of Discovery is very much what I think the Enterprise should have looked like in the movies, because the one in the movies is just bulky and clunky, and it's not aesthetic at all.
Yeah,
and when I saw the end of Discovery season 1 and the beginning of 2, the outside of the ship looks great.
Oh yeah. I would say, and now that I've seen the inside of it as well, or at least seen the bridge and you see the bridge and you see like shots of the corridors. In this most recent Discovery episode. So you get a decent look at like the parts of the ship that we mostly saw in the original show. Like you don't see sick bay or the transporter room or engineering, but it's mostly corridors and the bridge is what you see of the Enterprise. And it looks so good. And it's completely in line with the aesthetic that they've established for Discovery. Fits into that universe perfectly, but also is so inspired by
evocative of the original.
Yeah, the original. I mean, from the color scheme, like the use of gray and red, the layout of the bridge, the way the stations are all in the same place, but yet things are a little different. Like they found room for extra stuff that wasn't there in the original set, but it makes sense the way they did it. It's just so well done. And yeah, I do. I mean, when you see it, you'll have to come to your own conclusion. But I liked it better than the bridge of the Enterprise in the newer movies as well. I didn't have a huge problem with that bridge. I thought the bridge set.
Me neither.
I thought it was fine, but it doesn't. It's not as evocative of the classic set.
Right.
And this version on Discovery is very, very evocative of the classic set, and it's just gorgeous. And I loved it.
Of course, people will bitch. It's different.
Yeah.
Well, of course it's different.
Yeah.
I mean, not just production values, but also you did the video about the whole conspiracy theory nonsense that CBS is conspiring to hide the fact that it's a different timeline. Here's what I did in my head, because obviously it looks different and it doesn't match up. Yeah. What I did in my head was I said, you know what? This is timeline 3, but everything happened exactly the way it happened in timeline 1. It just looks different. And bam, it was resolved in my head. And that was it. And I didn't need to have a huge conspiracy at the highest echelons of CBS and Paramount and Viacom to explain what's going on. I just said...
They're lying to you.
I just said, it's a different timeline, but everything that happened. It just aesthetically looked different. Bam, end of problem.
Yeah, head
no
canon,
issue. Yeah. It's resolved. Yeah, that's all you need to do. If you don't want to believe it's timeline 1, then believe it's timeline 3. But don't make a huge real-world conspiracy theory out of it. Just come up with an excuse and move on.
But they're telling you it's timeline 1. They're lying to you.
They're saying it's timeline 1 for legal issues. That's it. Come on.
But yeah, the whole thing is just. I mean, I keep coming back to this, and it amazes me that you will actually get into real arguments with people about this when I say it's made up. It's
again, hate and rage are drugs for some people.
It's a made up TV show. They can make it look however the fuck they want. And you can say, yes, but if it's in the same timeline as this show, then it has to look like this. No, it doesn't. That show was all made up. Just like this one.
They could make the bridge look like C&C from Babylon 5 if they wanted to.
Yes.
Because they stole everything else from Babylon 5.
They could have Babylon 5 characters just show up, and everybody pretends that they've been in the same universe all along. Yeah. Like, if they own the rights, obviously they legally couldn't do that. But if they legally, it's just like people are talking about now that the
ship off the port bow, Captain. It's Cylon.
Yeah, fuck it. Like, they can do. Have you ever read a comic book in your life where they did a crossover, and when they did like the big like company wide crossovers like DC versus Marvel, they had to come up with like an overarching story that explained how the universes were colliding. But if they just did like Superman and Spider-Man for like a one-off, they just said fuck it. They're in the same timeline. Fuck it. Superman goes to New York and he meets Spider-Man. Okay. Like
I like when they did the after one of the DC Marvel crossovers, there was apparently an issue of like Batman or Nightwing or something where Nightwing is referring to an incident that happened in that crossover, and he makes a reference to the incident, what was going on, and he added, with that guy whose name I can't remember at the moment because they don't have the rights to use the name. So it's just, I can't remember the name right now. Oh well.
Yeah, it's
they
like,
referred to it. You know,
things like that have always happened, and it's been that way in Star Trek since the beginning. The timelines, the canon has always been extremely flexible and extremely changeable. People don't like to admit this now, but when they changed how Klingons looked, originally, that was a retcon. They didn't explain that until like 20 years later. And they
probably should have let it slide anyway.
They shouldn't have explained it because they didn't need to. But they just up and changed it because that's just decided
the entire explanation is 2 words: budgetary concerns.
Exactly. And we just accepted it. And yeah, they did eventually do a 2-parter in Enterprise that explained it, but they didn't need to.
For absolutely no reason. For
absolutely no reason. And by that point, everybody had accepted it anyway. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just, there's no, so the idea that like you should treat what happens on a made up TV show as a historical event and
well, not tearing that. Well, you can get that bent out of shape over what Klingons look like, while not getting bent out of shape over the president of the United States promoting death threats against a sitting congresswoman. Yeah,
right.
Your priorities are a little messed up.
It's like, yeah, and look, I'll be the first to say, when it took me maybe 2 episodes of Discovery to get used to the fact that Klingons look that way now, because it is very different. I mean, you can tell, like, it's in the ballpark. They're obviously Klingons, but they're very different. And it took me a while to adjust to that. But when I did, that was it. And I always recognized that it was the fact that I've just gotten used to Klingons looking a certain way. It wasn't that I thought they were doing it wrong. They just had a very different take on it than I was used to.
Klingons are made up. There is no right or wrong.
There are no Klingons.
Can I just say,
yes,
because we're running a bit late, so
yes,
maybe
please.
One last thing about Klingons on the show, and then we'll wrap up.
Let's do it.
Something that is actually, they did it, it's arguably more realistic, but I think it's a bit more unfair as far as TV production goes, or to the certain viewers. When the Klingons are talking just to Klingons, they have conversations in Klingon, and it's all subtitled.
Yeah.
With Babylon 5, Straczynski said, when you have Centauri and they're, of course, talking, when Londo and Vir are talking, or when Lanier and Delenn are talking, they're speaking in Centauri or Minbari, whatever their languages are. But they put it in English for the concerns of TV. I mean, if you have entire conversations, huge stretches where people are speaking in a made-up language, first of all, it's a lot of work, and it's difficult for the actors to learn that and make it work. But it's also very unfair to viewers who have vision impairment or who can't necessarily read subtitles on the screen for 5-10 minutes at a time. And Discovery, when they have scenes where the Klingons are talking to each other, there were entire scenes that were completely in this made-up language, and they were subtitled. And if you are somebody who has trouble reading that, or that is kind of unfair to viewers who have visual impairment. Yeah, and it's something that you can argue it's more realistic as such, but it's also more impractical from just a television production and television viewership standpoint. And it's something that, while I understand why they did it, I'm not sure it was a good choice to do it.
Yeah, you're right. And it is kind of, in terms of, it's more realistic. I mean, if that was the thinking behind it, it is a weird line to draw when you're doing it on a show where the titular ship is able to, as Captain Pike says, skip across the universe on a highway made of magic mushrooms.
Right.
I
think in Star Trek, I think they acknowledge at some points in Star Trek that there's different languages being spoken, but then they just switch back into English. I think in Star Trek 6, at one point where, like during the trial, I think the very first scene is a Chang, a very Klingon name.
Yeah.
Is shouting in Klingon, and you have a translator, and they show that the translator is there, and then they just have everything in English, and they have the thing where the translator or whatever, but they just have everything in English because it's a lot more fair to the viewer, and it's a lot better dramatically.
Yeah.
So they acknowledge it, and then they brush it off, basically.
Right, and the only difference between that and most other Star Trek shows is that they never even bother to acknowledge it. You just sort of you accept that that's just the conceit. It's again, this is something that a lot of people don't seem to realize. Like, there are these things in storytelling called conceits, where you just put it in there and you just assume that it is the way it is because it makes things easier or because it makes you more able to clearly communicate.
Yeah.
And a conceit. An example of a conceit would be characters who in real life would not be speaking English are shown to be speaking English because you're making it for a mostly English speaking audience, and it's just easier than translating everything.
Babylon 5 had, especially in the spin-off series that didn't last too long, very much acknowledged the language issue and had people trying to translate new languages. Doctor Who hand-waved it with the TARDIS as a low-grade telepathic circuit that just translates for everyone to avoid the problem. Hitchhiker's Guide had the Babelfish that goes in your ear. For the most part, Star Trek and other shows, Stargate and so on, they just sort of ignore it and just pretend everyone speaks English, and that works just as well for a television show.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
So anyway,
don't take it so seriously.
Yeah, it's just say to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax. If there's going to be a rule for our society, that should be one of those rules. It should not be one of the top ones. There's way more important shit. But when we get down maybe into the 30s or 40s of the rules that we should all abide by, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
So we had a full show this time.
Yes,
and
we did.
We still didn't get to the whole strange planet reaction.
Oh, that's right.
But we'll either save that for next time or not do it at all. Yeah. We're way over at this point.
That's true. So. Yeah, we want to talk about that too. So let's wrap it up, and then we can continue to converse personally off the air, and none of you people watching will get to know what we're talking about, which you don't deserve to know anyway.
Are you bringing this full circle by insulting our viewers at the end too?
You no good pieces of fucking Anyway,
this man does not speak for me. This man does not speak for me.
Always sucking up to the audience.
Did you hear back from Pierre at all?
Let me see. Thanks for giving me the chance to put a button on that bit. He left me a voicemail. Let me listen.
Is it in French?
It's in French. And unfortunately, I don't have a Babelfish, so I don't know what he's saying. I'll run that.
You know what?
I'll run that through Google Translate later.
He speaks English. He did that just to screw with you.
Yeah, he did. He's hi-hatting me. He's yeah.
All right, and on that note, we'll wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed this and got a little something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll see.
We've penciled in the next one for May 12th.
That's right, because of scheduling issues. It's probably the best time for us to do it. So it's the rare occasion where we can actually give you a fairly specific prediction of when the next show is going to be. So
next show will probably be on May 12th at the same 1 p.m. Eastern, not 1 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, YouTube. I live in the Eastern time zone, okay? I don't know why you're giving me Pacific times for shit. All right, so thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you on May the 12th.
See you then.